Hello everyone, and welcome back to Armatus Designs. Today we're going to be doing a two-part helmet mold. This is going to be a mold of my newly finished full-face Batman cowl. This is for a client in Australia, and now that I've finished the model, it needs to be molded so it can be cast out of a durable polyurethane rather than the more fragile plastics that the model is made out of. So because this is a big and complex shape, this needs to be a two-part mold because you'd never get a one-part mold off it correctly. So what we're going to do to make that is use some Rebound 25, and that's a two-part, or it's a brush-on silicone sold by Smooth On, and we're going to make it in two parts. And then to make a mother mold on top of that, which is like a rigid outer shell that holds the mold in the correct place during mold making, we're going to use some freeform air, also from Smooth On. Let's get started. The first thing you need to do in preparation for mold making is to divide your model in half. I'm choosing to do this with a water-based clay called claystone, although oil-based clay works fine as well. The purpose of this clay wall is to act as a barrier, dividing the model into two equal halves. Then, once this barrier is created and smoothed out, silicone can be brushed onto one half of the model, and the clay wall can be removed. Then silicone can be brushed onto the other half of the model, completing the silicone mold. You want the clay wall to extend outwards from your model about 1.5 inches. This will allow a good sturdy lip for the silicone jacket that you brush on top of it, and will help it seat inside its mother mold easier. After you've created your wall, you want it to be as flat and smooth as possible to the model. This will allow less of a seam line between the two mold halves and allow your castings to be cleaner and require less cleanup work before being painted. Once your clay wall is finished, you want to add what's called registration points. These are just little dimples and curves in the clay wall that the silicone will seep into. Once both halves of the silicone jacket are complete, these registration points will allow them to line up correctly inside your mold and keep them from slipping out of place. A release agent must be applied to your model before brushing on silicone to ensure it doesn't stick. Now the model is ready for its first layer of silicone. Mix equal parts of the silicone into a single container and stir it thoroughly before applying it to the model. This first coat goes on thin to capture all of the details in the original model. Later layers will be thickened for added strength. You want to apply this first level of silicone to the model as thinly as possible. This will ensure that no air is trapped between the model and the layer of silicone. I like to do this by drizzling silicone over the model initially, and then brushing it over the entire surface area to ensure that the model is coated evenly. Once the first coat has dried to the point where it is tacky, which is usually about 60 minutes, it's time to apply a second coat. This goes on exactly like the first one and simply thickens the layer of silicone. The third layer of silicone is thickened with Thivex. This changes the consistency to more of a peanut butter-like state and allows it to coat the sharp edges and undercuts of the model better than in its normal state. The goal of the jacket is to cover the model uniformly and to be a consistent shape. You want to continue to build up normal and thickened layers of silicone on your model until it's a uniform shape and roughly 3/8 of an inch thick. You'll notice that I'm pouring extra silicone into a painter's tray to make half circles.
These will be popped out and applied to the last coat of the model to form registration keys against the mother mold. After applying your last layer of silicone to the front of the model and allowing for proper cure time, it's time to flip the model over and remove the clay wall that we applied earlier. This is also the time to trim away any excess silicone that is dripped off your model. Once the back end of the model is cleaned up, apply a layer of Vaseline to the silicone lip. This will prevent the two silicone jackets from sticking to each other. Then apply a release agent as normal to the back of the model. To make the back half of the silicone mold, simply add layers of silicone exactly as we did to make the front half of the mold. Now that both halves of the silicone mold are finished, it's time to make the mother mold, or rigid frame, that goes on top of the silicone to make sure that it stays in place during casting. Here I'm heating up and bending a piece of 1/4-inch Sintra plastic around the model to get a perfect representation of the outside seam of the mold jacket. This serves as a template and is then traced onto a sheet of ABS plastic. This tracing is extended by 2 inches to form a frame and then is cut out using a bandsaw. 2 of these shapes must be cut out to form the front half and back half of the mold shell. These 2 frames are taped together and then holes are drilled using a Dremel to ensure that they'll line up correctly using bolts and wing nuts once the mold shell is completed. I ended up splitting this mold shell into 3 parts to allow molding and demolding to be easier, although that's unnecessary for most molds of this type. Once the frame is complete, use modeling clay to fill in any gaps between the frame and the silicone jacket. This will help the frame stay in place and seal off each individual section of the shell. Now it's time to mix up and spread free-form air over the exposed silicone. This is applied in layers just like the silicone as it bonds to itself. You want to make sure each section is also bonded to the frame. Layers should continually be built up until it's evenly coated and at least a 1/2 inch thick. Once all sides of the shell or mother mold are completed, remove all nuts and bolts from the frame. It's now time to remove everything from the initial model. This is the most frustrating part of mold making and must be done slowly and with care. Parts of my shell ended up separating from the frame once they were all removed. This was easily remedied with a bit of super glue, and for added strength I also fiberglassed the outside of the shell to the frame. Once everything is removed, the mold can be reassembled and used to cast durable resin copies of the item that you have molded in perfect detail. This mold can be used to make several dozen good castings and will last for years.
Now that the mold is finished, the only thing left to do is use it. This is the first pull out of the mold, which is the name for the first casting. And as you can see, it's a almost 100% perfectly accurate replica of the model that was molded. There are a few inconsistencies that mostly in the seam line, which just needs a little bit of sanding and prep work, and otherwise it's ready for paint. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a little bit about the molding process. I'll have a video on how to cast with different plastics using your mold up very soon, annotation here. Thanks for watching, see you guys next time. The nice thing about having a hardwood work desk is when you get up working with a messy project like I just did, all you gotta do is sand it back. and then it's good as new.